Now, if you were watching earlier, you'd know that today is Africa Industrialisation Day, and it comes this year with a theme that takes cognizance of the recently signed Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Well, to help us unpack the journey of industrialization on the continent, but more specifically in South Africa, and also looking more specifically to black industrialists, I'm now joined by the president of the Black Business Council, Sandile Zungu. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me here.
So, Africa Industrialisation Day, really important day for us to think and reflect about the journey that the continent has gone on. I was speaking earlier to Leon Lowe from the Free Market Foundation, and he says that over the years we just haven't done the right things, but things are slowly starting to change as a lot of our countries are showing record growths on the globe. But let's chunk it down to South Africa, and we've had many conversations about creating black industrialists like you, and I just wonder, how difficult has that journey been? And we'll then start to unpack what happens next.
Well, it's been a very difficult journey. It continues to be very difficult for many aspirant black industrialists. Some of the issues, the role of multinationals. There are multinationals who have been given pretty much carte blanche, free reign in the value chains, and they very bullishly pay their suppliers in 180 days in some cases 120 days. You will not have emerging entrepreneurs, small businesses becoming large entrepreneurs if they play the role of bankers to giants who are operating in South Africa. So that is a perfect example of how can government look at the laws, competition laws, as instruments to open up this economy so that industrialists, whether they are black or white, especially black industrialists, can then emerge. Another issue is access to capital. Many times people say, no, it's not capital that matters, it's ideas. Well and good. But what about those who have got bright ideas, but they cannot have them funded by institutions, whether it's DFIs, or commercial banks, simply because they don't believe in the entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa, especially of black entrepreneurs, and they go around with bright ideas, but they cannot be funded. The NEF, which was specifically created to foster greater participation by black people in the economy. For the last decade, we've had just one story. It's undercapitalized. The promises that were made in terms of allocation of shares, whether it's Telkom or Safcol or whichever other entity that was to be privatized, have not come to fruition. It's undercapitalized.
So where has it gone wrong? Because we've had policies that talk about black economic empowerment, and a few people have been empowered, but the story seems to be those get re-empowered and very few new players are coming through. Where has it gone wrong?
I don't even think that the focus should be on those who are re-empowered, because that's a red herring. The fact of the matter is that there's not been enough capital thrown into the black industrialist program. Very few people get support, even those that really comply with all the requirements. It takes a very long time before the disbursements happen. And in a highly competitive environment, time is money. Being agile and responding quickly gives you that competitive advantage, which you lose and never to recover if you are slow at responding. So in a way, these institutions of state have been mainly by default rather than design, have been really sad players in terms of assisting black people. But there's a very important issue of value chains. I'm a real firm believer that for black people to arrive in South African economy, they have to own value chains. If you take bread, for example, you've got to go back to the ownership of land to the suppliers of fertilizer, to people who are actually planting, wheat, to bakeries, or basically to millers, to owners of infrastructure for storage and distribution, right up to retail, and say this staple food for black working class people in South Africa, how can it be brought in black hands in its entirety? Once you own those value chains from A to Z, and then you begin to horizontally enhance your influence in the rest of the economy.
So what needs to happen next? You know, if the president is sitting with his advisors and he gets going, what does he need to do, and what needs to happen so that we're not having this conversation in 10 years' time?
We will have this conversation in 10 years' time, unfortunately, because it takes a very long time to really have meaningful change in an area like the economy. And to give an impression that's going to be very quick will be to raise false hope and to mislead the people. It's going to take quite a while. We believe that the government means well. Some of the measures that the government has taken are in the right direction. We just need to nudge them, encourage them, and where they're too slow, let's raise the whip and be hard on them. But it takes a government, but it also takes the entrepreneurial spirit among black people, which needs to be nurtured and supported, as well as all other things, like the role of multinationals who must create the market for some of the black industrialist projects.
I suppose also we've got to stop scoring own goals. We've heard today from the Auditor General, 62 billion in wasteful expenditure. That means a lot of the times, a lot of corruption has taken place, money's gone and not been used where it's supposed to be used. So we have to stop that as well, because that is part of gagging or stopping the industrialization process.
Well, that's the truth. That wasteful expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, is something that we need to frown upon. But sometimes the accounting language can be quite misleading, and it can create an alarmist state of let's throw our hands in the air, let's just give up. We cannot bury our heads in the sand. This economy in South Africa is huge. It's one of the largest economies. It's very resilient. We need to throw our shoulders on the wheel and move it forward, and deal with all these interruptions and distractions, and make sure that the institutions like the National Prosecuting Authority are properly empowered, capacitated, as well as they must do their work.
Mr. Zungu, unfortunately we've run out of time, as we always do with these conversations, but thanks so much indeed for coming in and giving us your insights on this very important subject on this day. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.